You know what? That's it. I'm telling him the tale.
Kalu? No.
Wait, the tail? As in the tail? The tail?
Swapped. With Netflix's first animated feature of 2026, this comes with good news and bad news. The good news is that one of the leads of this film is Michael B. Jordan, fresh out of his Oscar win for his iconic performance in Sinners. So I'm excited to see how he'll bring his incredible talent to animation. The bad news, however, the movie is from Skydance Animation.
No, please, no.
If you're not familiar with them, then I envy your blissful ignorance. As much as they try to place themselves as a major animation studio, they've been having possibly the worst reputation in Hollywood's animation industry as of this review, where instead of assembling its own dedicated audience, Skydance has gathered more allegations about how the management has been a total nightmare for everyone because of the terrible leadership of its disgraced creative head, John Lasseter. And considering why he was kicked out of Disney and Pixar, I wouldn't be surprised if they turned out to be true. But even if you disregard that and just look at the features alone, that won't do them any favors because they straight up suck! This is especially the case with their last feature, Spellbound, an animated musical with an all-star cast and new songs by Disney legend Alan Menken, yet all it did was make Moana 2, which came out around the same time, look much better in comparison. Seriously, how did you make an Alan Menken musical bad? That requires effort to make it go in that direction. So, as you can imagine, after that experience, I'm not coming into this movie with the highest enthusiasm. And having the title change from Powerless to Puku to something that sounds dull like Swapped isn't helping either. Then again, considering that one of the directors of Tangled, Nathan Greno, spent years bringing this to life, maybe there is a way that this movie can change the studio's destiny for the better. But now that we're about to swap our attention to the movie itself, will it be third time's the charm for Skydance? Or should Netflix swap animation studios to work with instead? Let's find out. The story. Prior to this movie, Skydance's strategy with their animated features like Luck and Spellbound was to pretty much copy Disney's formula to put out the illusion that Lasseter was the only reason why the House of Mouse had great success during the 2010s and why Pixar became a household name. However, they end up coming out as such terrible knockoffs that even Disney's recent animated films are in shock at seeing how much of a dumpster fire they turned out to be. But in Swapped, they decided to take a different approach and avoid trying to imitate the animated features of Disney as their strategy to produce their films. Instead, it decided to rip off a Disney live-action movie.
Wait, whoa,
In this case, Swapped is an animated clone of Freaky Friday, where the two leads suddenly switch bodies to become one another, or specifically become each other's species, so that they not only understand each other better, but through that understanding, they could be able to resolve the big problem to make the valley a better place for everyone. Even with its more natural animated setting, the difference this movie does with its plot is honestly minimal, following virtually the same steps as the Disney film to keep moving forward while making it feel more basic now that it's just a bird and a mammal.
Why did you have to touch the pod? Why?
Why didn't you tell me not to touch the pod?
I did.
When?
Literally right before you touched it.
And it's one thing if this was just copying Freaky Friday, but the bigger issue is when you look past that. Take away the Disney comparison, and what you have with Swapped is just the typical body swap plot. A narrative that is already considered a tiresome trope in cartoons where it's mainly used when a show is running out of ideas for episodes. But at the very least, those have the gimmick of the familiar characters trying to act like one another as they go put things back to normal. Swapped, on the other hand, as an original animated film, switches bodies between a predator and prey whose personalities are not well developed, resulting in one of the most generic versions of the trope that offers next to nothing with its story in order to be engaging.
Ugh, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna come up with another plan.
Cut the bossy routine for 1 second and listen to me.
But let's say you're able to forgive it for not having an original plot. If you're able to look past all that, can there be something worthwhile that it can deliver? Well, in that regard, I can actually say that no, the script in general is a complete mess.
You don't trust me? Ouch.
To make matters worse, on top of having an overused story and dependent on its tropes to make the movie progress, the execution of its storytelling also has its fair share of problems. More often than not, there are some scenes that feel like they just drag on, mainly because the characters tend to argue a lot with each other, especially the two leads, and all those moments do is just stop the movie on its tracks so that they let it all out before the journey continues. Those are the times when the movie can go from being dull to straight up annoying that makes the experience worse. And it doesn't help either when they are sometimes for the sake of delivering the comedy, which I think is among the feature's weakest elements. Try as it might to sprinkle in some humor to give the kids some laughs, but they are hardly chuckle-worthy and they just feel like failed attempts to lighten up the mood.
What am I supposed to do, huh? I'm supposed to just raise my wings and...
And it doesn't help either that by the third act, as much as it wants to deliver an epic climax, it feels like the movie is just making things up by that point where it doesn't care anymore about the logic of its own world and just randomly thought about a solution just for the sake of giving this a happy ending. But with all those criticisms said, I would lie if I say that there is nothing that the story did well. On the flip side, the film's strongest aspect that I'll discuss later is the world building. And whenever it has a moment when the characters actually do shut up and present the valley, they can be pretty nice to see the feature's creative capabilities and give the viewer a chance to immerse in its fantastical interpretation of nature. Also, as bad as the narrative itself is, it does come with a good message about how it's more important to understand each other instead of segregating ourselves in fear. Is the moral to be expected from a body swap story like this? Sure. But what it lacks in originality does kind of make up for it in the execution for the sake of giving this a bit of substance.
All of their parents were saved by the piplets that you showed me how to eat.
I won't say that this is the worst story from the studio, and there are a few parts where they did get it right. However, that doesn't change that the overall picture doesn't provide much value to the story, and it feels like its priority is low where it was given a generic plot so that the team can focus on the film's style. And that's probably Swap's biggest mistake, because if the core of what this is all about is weak, then it's hard to get emotionally invested in the picture in general. And with that kind of treatment, I feel like the story deserves a 3 out of 10. It may have some magic to change the animal species, but not enough to make it feel like it matters. The animation. While the movie may not offer a good script, that doesn't mean that there wasn't effort put into the feature in general, and the biggest proof of that is with the animation. I'll even say that the best thing about Swapped is that the movie is visually gorgeous, and this is mainly thanks to the world building. This is where the feature puts in all of its creative energy in order to make the valley be this enchanted forest where the animals are fused with plants. With the exception of the puku, who are just default mammals, you got birds called the javan, whose feathers are like leaves, deer and wolves are partly trees, snakes who are like roots, bears that are like mossy rocks, just to name a few. There actually is an aspect of the feature where part of the fun from watching this is to discover how these animals are able to camouflage in their environment. And whenever they do show up, it's always a surprise where every corner of the valley has something that is more than meets the eye. Rather it be to deliver a sense of wonder, or that the protagonists are suddenly in danger.
Ugh, something really smells here.
That thing's dad is out there somewhere. He's right here.
Speaking of the valley itself, in every way that you look at it, the place is impressive. It's able to show how the scale of the area is grand, where there is so much for the characters to go and explore. But at the same time, it does well to present the perspective of the animals when looking at it up close, capturing all the details within to show how they're doing what they can to survive in the forest, as well as getting their textures right and the effects strong whenever there's water, fire, or magic involved to make the scenes feel more impactful. It's thanks to those extra layers where the fusion feels convincing and how there is so much life going on in the valley, along with doing well to bring out all the natural colors in order to get the attention of our eyes. Like I said, whenever the feature allows it, the best scenes are whenever we get the opportunity to look around the forest and watch those elements of fantasy make this environment feel special, which can only be enhanced by the solid score by Siddhara Khosla. And with the character animation, while this may not be a stylistic feature that makes the acting go dynamic, it does well to convey the emotions of the characters like the two protagonists as we see their bond grow while trying to return to their regular bodies. Not to mention having a few additional moments where they have extra transformations as part of their adventure.
There was only one pod, and we said Boogle just before we touched it.
However, as much as I praise the team at Skydance for the beautiful work they did on the animation, the visual magic of Swap doesn't last throughout. And this is not necessarily because of the animation itself, but instead, it's the movie that's holding back its true potential. Because it had to work with a badly made script, it could only do what it can in order to maintain that sense of wonder. But eventually, I start to see that its fantasy is more of a novelty. When thinking about what's important in the story, the only fantastical elements that matter are the purple pods that can transform the animals, the firewolf, the massive zoo, and that's it. Sure, it can be cool to see the action scenes when the leads escape the predators who can easily disguise themselves as plants and rocks, but there is a point where it gets a bit repetitive, and if you take away that fusion aspect from the designs to make the characters just typical forest animals, there would be nothing in the story that would make a difference. In a way, it's a case of style over substance where it's very well done and it looks amazing, but the wow factor eventually wears off when it doesn't do much to make the story different from all the other body swap cartoons.
Why didn't you tell me not to touch the pods?
I did.
When?
Literally right before you touched it.
Well, you obviously didn't explain it very well.
But I will say that this won't be something that will make it lose a lot of points though. Again, this is just to mention how the story held its visuals back from displaying its full creativity. On its own, it's still admirably crafted that features many great creative ideas to present the combination of plants and animals to develop an enchanted forest that is exciting to explore. I won't say that this is some of the best of the year, but I'm still giving the animation a 9 out of 10. The movie itself is not great at all, but the visuals alone is what keeps it away from being overall terrible. The characters. When it comes to those Freaky Friday style plots, they can only be as strong as the characters themselves. Audiences can only be engaged with the picture if they want to see those who switch bodies return to normal and come out as better people. Swapped is not one of those movies that accomplish that, largely due to the characters being poorly built. Since just about all of the film's efforts were placed onto the world building, there's no room for the cast to expand upon their personalities or develop their own charm other than being bland archetypes that's been heavily used before. The only positive thing that I could say about them is that the voice acting is pretty good. Of course, it is to be expected for established actors like Michael B. Jordan and Juno Temple to do well in their roles, but I was surprised to discover that my favorite performance here was actually from Tracy Morgan. Much like the animals in the film, There is a lot more to Morgan's performance than what you first expect out of him, as he provides several layers to his character that really sells his personality just through his acting alone.
What I mean is, it makes you really appreciate why we need each other.
However, even with some talented actors, that is not enough to make the characters likable or have the viewer invested in their journey. When it comes to those whose bodies were swapped, there's Ollie, the typical curious protagonist that always thinks outside of the box to find solutions and wants to see what's beyond his little island. But what's holding him back are his parents, who keep telling him the standard warning of, "Oh, don't you go out there, son, the outside world is a dangerous place." So, much like the species themselves, the Puku are basically furry cliches.
I don't care what you saw. You don't go off island.
But why?
Because it's dangerous, that's why.
As for Ivy, she's the Javan that finds herself in a similar mess, who can be very chatty and sassy with Ollie when the two try to cooperate and get out of trouble. And the same can be said when she's with her sisters.
You still don't think you broke his brain? I did not break his brain.
She broke your brain.
At most, you are mildly concussed.
And when the two leads have to team up to go and become their old selves again, their dynamic can often get on my nerves. On top of the flow of their friendship being dull by going through the same beats that these narratives go, their constant bickering and arguing that can often interrupt the feature gets infuriating and lose any chances of me caring for either of them. Even when they do finally bond, it doesn't forgive how they've been so unpleasant to be with during most of the picture, as if their supernatural situation being boringly generic isn't bad enough. I understand if there are some people who may disagree with me on this and can be more forgiving where they were charmed by their partnership, but if you're like me and these two characters end up annoying you more than endearing you, then the whole movie is mostly a lost cause.
All Pukus are jealous, petty little rodents.
Oh, when I get that pod, I can't wait to drive all of you off my island. Hey.
Outside of those two, there are few characters worth mentioning that matter to the story. There are the tree wolves, who frequently hunt the pair that are also doing what they can to survive with a little kid in the pack. Boogle is the naive, childlike friend who helped guide the two to find some purple pods to transform. And the firewolf, who starts off as just a legend that is said to cause the division within the valley, but then shows up in the third act to be the villain and the biggest threat to the forest. It's also worth noting that when he finally shows up, he's actually the reveal of a plot twist villain. And without spoiling anything, I'll say that the twist was definitely unexpected. But that's because it came right out of nowhere and makes no sense. Seriously, there's no build-up or clues that indicate the firewolf was among them this whole time. He just randomly shows up and completely changes the direction of the picture. I mean, it's very easy to hide your identity when bad writing can be your cover.
You're the one. You tore the valley apart.
You created the dam. You drove the zoo out.
As a character-driven movie, it fails when the characters are not enjoyable to watch. Regardless if they're in their normal bodies or did the switch, it's hard to connect with them when they're either overly recycled tropes or constant complainers. Sure, the actors are good with what they did, but that doesn't compensate for their lack of charm. Like the story, I'm giving the characters a 3 out of 10. They're not horrible enough to make me want to burn down the whole valley, but their attitudes really spoiled the experience. I'll give it that I was dazzled when it brought me to this magical valley, but unfortunately, it did not bring me into a good movie. Swapped is what happens when you put all your energy onto the world building and provide next to nothing towards anything else. It's an animated feature that, at best, is very mixed, where it can offer some good voice acting, a nice message of understanding each other, and beautiful animation that can immerse viewers in this forest where plants and animals literally come together. But all that creativity and work feel wasted when the picture's core is disappointingly weak, delivering a tiringly familiar plot, disorganized storytelling, bad comedy, and a cast of unpleasant characters. Even with all of its problems though, At worst, its biggest crime is that it ends up coming off as an easily forgettable film, and it's all around harmless. Maybe it's fine if you want to put it on for the sake of having some sound in the background or have it be a kid distractor, but if you're looking for an actual entertaining animated feature, I recommend finding something else on Netflix. Or why not go see something in theaters? I heard that there's another animated feature that came out at the same time as Swapped, so your time could be better spent watching Animal. On second thought, there are worse things out there than to be forgettable, and maybe it's best to just stay at home.
Let's have no one do that again!
But if you got some entertainment out of this review, then why not give this a like and subscribe to my channel? You can also join me on Patreon and swap your viewing experience into support where you could get some great rewards at the same time. To its credit, while it may come off as a below average feature, I consider this an improvement as a Skydance animation film. A very minor improvement, sure, but compared to Luck and Spellbound, going from garbage to mediocre is still considered a step up.
Pretty good stuff, huh? Eh. What do you mean, eh?